I'm showing you here on this side that this pedal actually goes on opposite threads or reverse threads, and so I'm turning it left hand and it's actually tightening. So that's the way pedals are designed. They're always that way on bicycles, and just something to note when you're assembling this. When you put these on, there's a nice little slot here to be able to stick a wrench in and tighten them up. You just want to get a good snug bite on those to make sure they're good and tight. Okay, the next thing we're going to install is the seat, and that comprises of two parts. You have the seat shaft and then you have the actual seat itself. Now, one thing I want to show you on this seat shaft is you have a straight cut end and you have a tapered or beveled cut. So this beveled cut always goes towards the top, and so that is the end that's going to go into the seat. And there's a seat clamp underneath here. You just slip it inside of there. You're going to go through just to the point where that kind of comes through the clamp right there, and then you're going to tighten it up. It can stick through a little more like that. It can actually even go all the way up and touch the bottom of the seat if you want. The only disadvantage to that is you lose a little bit of adjustability as your child grows to be able to lift that seat. One thing I'll say multiple times here is that I strongly recommend that you put the seat in as low as possible to keep the center of gravity low on the tricycle when the child is young and first learning to ride. So we're going to go ahead and tighten that up now. I'm going to do this a simple way here and just use a crescent wrench to tighten this up, and I'm just going to put a few turns on each side. If you have a socket set or an impact gun, then you can go ahead and use that too, but if you don't, I just want to show you that it's really not that tough to do it by hand, and it's pretty quick. So you try and tighten both sides and make sure that that shaft is in there good and tight, because you don't want it slipping. Down here you'll see that there's already a bolt and a nut in the seat retainer, and we're just going to take that in, and what you're going to want to do is basically drop this all the way down. And that's the safest place to start, especially for young kids who are just learning to ride. It keeps the center of gravity as low as possible on the tricycle, and it helps them to balance. As they get older, you can lift the seat up and give them a little more distance between for the length of their leg, but for right now we definitely want to keep it down as low as possible. So it's really simple. Just gonna tighten up one nut here. You want to keep your eye on the seat to make sure that it is straight. It's kind of uncomfortable riding a bike that doesn't have a straight seat, so I'll give this a few turns and tighten it up. This isn't a super critical bolt, because the worst thing that's going to happen is the seat's going to turn a little bit while the kid's riding it, but it's not going to fall off or fall out. Because it's set to the lowest height, it can't drop. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is probably the most fun of the whole tricycle, and certainly something the kids will have a lot of fun with, and that's the bell. So we're going to assemble the bell, and it comes with one screw in it. I'm just going to take my screw gun and loosen that up. I'm actually going to take that screw all the way out, and then I'm going to open this up and slip it around the bar like that. Take the same screw and stick it back up in there, and I want to get this as close as possible, if not right next to that handlebar, because remember, these little tykes have very small hands, so you don't want to make them reach too far off the handle. And then I'm going to go ahead and tighten that up. And you can use a regular screwdriver if you want. You just kind of want to tighten it until it's snug and it stays there, and the bell is ready to go. That's it on the bike other than the baskets, and I will walk through showing you how to do the baskets now. Okay, the first basket is really simple. Couldn't be any more simple, but it is made up for on the rear basket, and the rear basket is nothing short of sort of a pain. The front basket is as simple as that. You just drop it on. It's got a cute little hooks on the front of it right there. If you choose, you can tie wrap it to this front piece. If for some reason you're going on an adventure that doesn't require the basket, you can easily pop it off and just not use it. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is assemble the rear basket assembly, and this is the base to the basket, so we're actually going to put bolts through these holes eventually to set it on the bike. The sides to this are longer than the front and the rear, and you want to put the narrow side of the sides down, and you hook it onto the base like this, and then what I would recommend is go ahead and assemble it with a couple tie wraps just to make it easier. I'm going to show you these little metal clamps that they send with them. You simply wrap those around where the metal comes together, and then take a pair of pliers or channel locks or whatever and clamp this together. So you're essentially just rolling the metal around and holding that together. Really, it does the same job as a tie wrap. The assembly of this is a little bit easier if you use a tie wrap first, because it helps hold it together. As you will see in a minute, this entire assembly can be a challenge to get, one, to get together, and two, to get it to stay together while you're assembling it. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the way I think the manufacturer intended for it to be assembled, but again, I would recommend using some tie wraps to assist you. So these clamps clamp around here like this. That's a side and the bottom, and we are now going to take, say, the rear piece and hook it on and integrate it with these side pieces, and then pull it up and work our way around. And so now we're going to put two more of these clamps on. We're going to tighten those up. When you're tightening these, there's a couple things to think about. One, try to keep the end in a spot that is not going to be impacted or accessible by the kid as much as possible. So try to keep them on the bottom, keep the ends on the bottom. Not that they're super sharp, but you just want to be conscious of that. And then the other thing is, when you're tightening them, I think this would actually be easier with a smaller pair of pliers, but when you're tightening up, tighten one side and then sort of fold the other side over the top of it, and that allows you to get it a bit tighter than just clamping them together. And so that's the rear. So we'll go ahead and move on to the other side. We're going to hook it. We're going to hook it to the side here. And this is where it gets tricky, and it's kind of hard to get them to come together sometimes, but we'll make it. Okay, and then before we put the rest of the clamps on, we're going to go ahead and get this one put on there. So the basket is together now, and we've got a few clamps holding it, so it's not going to fall apart on us. If you do have trouble holding it together, then grab a family member and somebody that wants to spend 5 minutes with you helping you, and have them hold it for you, and don't get frustrated, just have fun with it. And, it's not that tough. I'm sort of showing you here. I think one of the mistakes I've made as I've done these in the past is I tried to assemble the whole thing and then put the clamps on, and it's just too difficult. You need to have something holding it together while you're doing the assembly. And then these clamps sort of do the job of holding it all together at the end. Okay, the final step here is we're going to mount the basket onto the back of the tricycle. I'm just going to set that on there, and we're going to take the 4 screws that they provide with it, and we're going to stick those through the basket and through the frame, so they stick down on the bottom. And then we're going to take, there's 4 nuts and 4 washers, and we're going to put a washer on and then a nut on. And these are nylon lock washers, nylon lock nuts, and they'll screw on by hand just a couple of threads, and then they'll get tight. And that's okay, because the nylon is engaging at that point, and what it's going to do is stop the nut from backing its way out over time. So I'm just starting all these with my finger. Okay, so the next step is going to be tightening these up, and you can use a little 5/16 wrench, or you can use a small crescent wrench. You're going to get on the nut on the bottom, and I'm just going to use a cordless screw gun here. You can use a regular screwdriver if you want. And I'm going to tighten, while I'm holding the nut on the bottom, I'm going to tighten the screw at the top until I get it snug. And there's 4 of them, so you want to get all 4 of them snugged up. And that's it. Okay, we're done. The tricycle's assembled. Just a couple quick review items. Safety items, remember, keep the seat as low as possible to keep the center of gravity low so that the tricycle doesn't tip as easily when they're first learning how to ride. And make sure, double check all of your brake components to make sure your brakes are functioning, and make sure that when you're teaching them to ride it the first time, it's really easy to assume that they're going to know how to do everything because it's not 2 wheels, and when they get on it, it doesn't fall over, and so you think, oh, well, they can just ride it. Well, be patient with them because they need to learn how to use the brakes. This bike can be just as dangerous as a regular bike if they're going down a hill and they don't know how to use the brakes. And so work with them on a flat or a very gradual slope to make sure that they know how to use the brakes before you let them go free with it. Tools, remember, use a letter opener to do a lot of the unwrapping of the plastic. It makes it go a lot faster. If you have a cordless tool, a drill or something like that, it helps a lot. If you don't, a regular screw gun works just fine. There's also socket tips that you saw me use a couple of, like a 10 millimeter or 5/16 for this, and that can be helpful as well, but not necessarily required. Just to keep things really simple, I know all of you have a crescent wrench hanging around, so I use a crescent wrench for a lot of this assembly. You can use a regular wrench that's the proper size, or you can use sockets and ratchets and things like that. I use some channel locks to tighten up the clamps on the rear basket. I would recommend tie wrapping that and then put the metal clamps on it. A regular pair of pliers would work just fine. You don't need channel locks. I used a pair of needle nose to hold the front brake. You could use a regular pair of pliers. You could also use these channel locks to do that job. I think it's important to have some kind of a tool, vice grips or something, to be able to hold that cable while you're tightening it up. I did not use this to assemble, but this is just a sample of a multi-tipped screwdriver that you could use if you wanted to. Remember when we put the hubcaps on the front fender, we had to beat those on with a hammer. Lots of other things you could use to do that if you don't have a hammer handy. And then for the unpackaging, there's a bunch of tie wraps to cut, and I used a pair of dikes to do that. Okay, there you go. It really was that easy, and I promise you that you can do it really quickly. And if you have any problems, call one of your local yellow van handyman, and I'm sure they can help you out. Remember, keep the seat low when the kids are first getting used to it, to keep that center of gravity low so it's not too tippy. And remember to really work with them on using the hand brakes so that they can learn how to stop without putting their feet down. It's just a lot easier if we teach them how to use that hand brake. And keep the seat low, teach them how to use the hand brake, everything will be good. Thanks.